She was 81 years old. And they were taking her home. Not a stranger's house. Not a rented flat she'd been meaning to leave anyway. Her home. The one she had chosen herself. The one she had painted, repaired, argued with, and loved, for 40 years. Think about that for a moment. 40 years. That's not just a number. That's a lifetime. That's every birthday, every winter morning, every cup of tea made in the same kitchen at the same hour. That's the wallpaper she had picked out with her late husband. The garden she had planted with her own hands. The window seat where she had read 1,000 books and watched the world slowly change outside. All of it. Gone. Because of a piece of paper. Gloria stood in the hallway, holding that legal notice with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The words blurred a little. She read them again. Then again. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days. They give you more notice when a dentist appointment gets cancelled. She didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Gloria wasn't that kind of woman. She had spent her whole life being the kind of woman who held it together. Who kept going. Who didn't make a fuss. So she stood there. Quietly. In the hallway she had walked through 10,000 times. And she let the silence say everything she couldn't. Her neighbor came over that evening. Sat across from her at the kitchen table. Said the usual things people say when they don't know what else to say. You'll be all right, Gloria. Something will come up. You can't let them win. Gloria nodded. Smiled a little. Made more tea. But inside, something was cracking. Not breaking. Not yet. Just cracking. The way old stone does before it finally gives way. Because here is what nobody understood. What nobody thought to ask. This wasn't just about a house. At 81, Gloria had no savings left. No family nearby. Her children were scattered, distant in every sense of the word. She had given her best years to other people, to work, to caregiving, to simply surviving. And she had done it all from this house. This foundation. Without it, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. The night before she had to leave, she walked through every room. Slowly. With no particular reason. Just walking. She touched the walls. She stood in the kitchen for a long time, doing nothing. She sat on the edge of the bed where her husband had taken his last breath, 18 years ago now, and she talked to him. Quietly. Like she still did sometimes when the world got too heavy. I don't know what to do, she whispered. The room didn't answer. Rooms never do. She packed one bag. Just one. Didn't take much. A change of clothes. Her medications. A small photograph. Her husband, young, laughing at something outside the frame. She had always loved that one. Because he looked so sure that whatever was coming was going to be good. She wished she felt the same. She stepped outside. Locked the door for the last time. Stood on the front step. Down the road, just barely visible through the early morning mist, an old stone structure. Heavy. Dark. Half swallowed by ivy and time. The old mill. Gloria had passed it 100 times over the years and never thought much about it. Just an old building. Just a relic. But this morning, she stopped. And stared. Something pulled at her. Quiet but clear. Like a voice just below the edge of hearing. She had heard that nobody had entered it since 1969. She had never wondered why. Until now. Why had no one gone in? What were they afraid of finding? Gloria picked up her bag. And walked toward it. Nobody thought she was serious. That was the first thing. When Gloria mentioned the mill, just casually, over the fence to her neighbor, the reaction was immediate. Almost automatic. A small laugh. A tilted head. The kind of look people give you when they're trying to be polite, but they absolutely think you've lost your mind. The old mill, Gloria? You can't be serious. But she was. Completely. Quietly. Seriously. And that, somehow, made it worse for everyone around her. People can handle panic. They can handle tears. They know what to do when someone breaks down. But a calm, decided 81-year-old woman with one bag over her shoulder and a look of quiet certainty in her eyes? That made people uncomfortable. Because it meant she wasn't confused. She had chosen this. Tom tried hardest to talk her out of it. Tom, who had lived next door for 22 years. Who had shoveled her driveway in winter without being asked. Who had checked on her after her husband passed. Good Tom. Worried Tom. He followed her down the front path, still talking. Gloria, listen to me. That place is falling apart. The roof is half gone. There's no electricity, no running water. You'll freeze. You'll get sick. Something will fall on you in the middle of the night and nobody will even know. He wasn't wrong. Every single thing he said was accurate. Gloria knew that. She stopped walking. Turned to look at him. Tom, she said. I appreciate you. I really do. He waited. But I am not going to spend whatever time I have left sleeping in a corner of someone else's house, feeling like a problem to be managed. Tom opened his mouth. Closed it again. Because what do you say to that? Here is something people don't talk about enough. There is a specific kind of pride that old people carry. Not arrogance. Not stubbornness for its own sake. Something quieter. Something built from decades of doing hard things alone. From surviving losses that would break younger people. From getting up again and again, when there was no particular reason to accept that sitting down felt worse. Gloria had that pride. She had buried a husband. Raised children mostly on her own after he got sick. Worked 2 jobs for years without complaining. Fixed things around the house herself because calling someone cost money she didn't have. She had earned the right to make her own choices. Even bad ones. Even ones that scared the people who loved her. She had seen the mill once, properly, about 15 years ago. She and her husband had taken a long walk one autumn afternoon. One of those slow, golden walks old couples take when they're not going anywhere in particular. Just moving. Just being together. They had come around the bend in the road and there it was. Heavy stone. Dark windows. Rusted iron door half buried in ivy. A silence around it that felt different. Thicker than normal silence. Her husband had stopped. Nobody goes in there, he had said. Not as a warning. More like a fact he was remembering. Why not? She had asked. He had shrugged. Nobody knows. Nobody asks. They had walked on. She had forgotten about it. Life had filled back in and covered the memory like water covers a stone. But standing here now, bag in hand, door locked behind her, nowhere else to go, she remembered. And she wondered. Why had nobody asked? What is it about that building that makes people just look away? She started walking. The village road was quiet that morning. Just mist and birdsong and the distant sound of a car somewhere far off. Normal sounds. Ordinary morning sounds. But Gloria felt anything but ordinary. With every step something shifted inside her. Not excitement exactly. Not quite fear either. Something between the two. The feeling you get when you're doing something that can't be undone. When you've passed the point where turning back would be easy. She didn't turn back. She reached the mill gate, an old iron frame, half fallen, more rust than metal now. Beyond it, a short path of broken stone leading to that heavy door. She stood there for a moment. The ivy moved slightly in the morning breeze. The building just waited. And somewhere in the back of Gloria's mind, a small voice said something she couldn't quite catch. Too quiet. Too quick. But it felt like a welcome. She pushed the gate open. Stepped through. And didn't look back at the village once. The door didn't want to open. That was the first sign. Not a warning exactly. More like a test. As if the building itself wanted to know, are you sure? Are you really sure about this? Gloria was sure. She grabbed the iron handle with both hands. Pulled. Nothing. Pulled again, harder this time, putting her whole weight behind it. The rust scraped. The hinges groaned like something waking up after a very long sleep. And then, with a sound like a slow, exhausted exhale, it gave way. Cold air hit her first. Not the normal cold of an October morning. Something older than that. Deeper. The kind of cold that lives in places where sunlight hasn't reached in a very long time. Gloria stood in the doorway and let her eyes adjust. Dark. Heavy dark. The kind your eyes take a moment to even begin understanding. Slowly, shapes started appearing. A stone floor, cracked and uneven. Thick wooden beams crossing overhead, some broken and hanging at wrong angles, some still somehow holding on. Walls of dense gray stone, sweating slightly with old moisture. A large iron mechanism in the center, the old millstone, frozen in place, covered in dust so thick it looked like gray fur. Everything was still. Everything was waiting. When was the last time a human being stood exactly where she was standing? 1969. 55 years ago. Gloria stepped inside. The smell reached her next. Earth. Old wood. Something damp and mineral she couldn't name. And underneath all of it, something else. Something she couldn't quite identify but somehow recognized. Like old paper. Like ink. Like something kept. She moved slowly. Carefully. Testing each step before putting her full weight down. The stone floor was uneven, some sections raised, some slightly sunken. Near the east wall she noticed the floor felt softer. Not safe. She made a mental note and stepped back. Her torch, a small one, kept in her bag out of old habit, came out of her pocket. The beam cut through the dark like a thin blade. She swept it slowly around the room. Broken shelf along one wall. Old rope, completely rotted, hanging from a ceiling hook. A pile of something in the corner that had long since stopped being recognizable. Two small windows, shuttered from inside, the wood swollen and warped with age, letting in only the thinnest strips of gray morning light. It was a ruin. Anyone would say so. And yet, Gloria didn't feel dread. That surprised her. She had expected fear. Had expected that first step inside to feel like a mistake, the kind your body tells you about before your brain catches up. But instead, quiet. A strange, specific quiet that felt less like emptiness and more like held breath. Like the building wasn't abandoned at all. Like it was simply paused. Waiting for something. Or someone. She stood very still and listened. Wind outside. A creak somewhere above her. Just the old wood settling, nothing more. The distant sound of a bird. And then nothing. Complete, absolute nothing. Gloria exhaled slowly. "All right," she said out loud. "To no one. To the building itself, maybe. Let's see what you are." She moved toward the far wall. Slowly. Torch sweeping left and right. And that's when she saw it. She almost missed it. Almost. The torch beam passed over it quickly and she had already moved on when something made her stop. Pull the light back. Look again. The wall in the far corner, behind where the old grain shelf had partially collapsed, had marks on it. Not the random scratches of settling stone. Not damage. Deliberate marks. Lines. Careful, considered lines. And between them, shapes. Symbols, maybe. Or letters so worn by time they had almost become shapes. Gloria stepped closer. Her heart was doing something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Not quite. Something older than fear. Something that lives just underneath it. Recognition. She raised the torch higher. The beam steadied on the wall. And Gloria's breath, slow and careful until that moment, simply stopped. Because these weren't random marks. These weren't settling cracks or old damage. Someone had carved this. Deliberately. Carefully. With patience and purpose and something that felt, even now, even across all these silent decades, like urgency. Like someone who needed to be remembered. Like someone who needed to be found. Gloria's hand, the one not holding the torch, reached out slowly toward the wall. Her fingers hovered just above the carved lines. She didn't touch them yet. She wasn't ready yet. Who did this? When? And why did it feel so familiar? She told herself one thing that first morning. Survive today. Think tomorrow. It sounds simple. It wasn't. Because surviving inside a collapsed, abandoned stone mill at 81 years old, with one bag, a small torch, and knees that ached before she even stood up, wasn't a small thing. It was everything. The roof was the first problem. 2 sections, one above the east corner, one near the center, had gaps wide enough to see sky through. Not cracks. Actual open gaps. Last night's wind had pushed cold air through them like a draft through an open window in January. Gloria stood underneath one and looked up. Gray sky. Moving clouds. A single bird crossing slowly above. She looked around the mill for something, anything, she could use. Near the collapsed shelf she found a roll of thick plastic sheeting. Old. Brittle at the edges. But mostly intact. She had no idea why it was there or how long it had been sitting in that corner. She didn't question it. She dragged it out. Found a broken plank long enough to reach the lower beam. And spent the better part of an hour, slowly, carefully, resting when she had to, wedging the plastic into position above the worst gap. It wasn't pretty. But it would hold the wind. For now. The floor near the east wall was next. She had noticed it the day before, that soft, slightly hollow feeling underfoot. The kind that means the stone beneath has cracked or the ground underneath has shifted. One wrong step and she could go through. She found 3 heavy wooden planks near the old millstone. Dragged them across the soft section one by one. Laid them flat. Overlapping. Tested each one carefully before trusting her weight to it. Her back screamed at her the whole time. She ignored it. You can hurt later, she told herself. Work now. Water was the hardest problem. No running water. No well she could find. Nothing. She stepped outside late morning and walked the perimeter of the building slowly. Looking. Thinking. On the north side, half hidden behind a mass of overgrown ivy, she found it. An old stone basin. Deep. Cracked on one side but mostly intact. And above it, a broken section of roof gutter directed straight down into it. She looked up at the sky. Clouds. Plenty of them. It would rain tonight. In this part of England, it always rained. She found a rusted bucket near the old gate. Cleaned it as best she could with dry grass and an old rag from her bag. Set it under the gutter beside the basin. And waited. It rained before midnight. When she woke at 3 a.m., cold, stiff, wrapped in every layer she owned, she heard it. The soft sound of water hitting the bottom of the bucket. She lay there in the dark and listened to it. And for the first time since she had walked through that iron door, she smiled. People from the village started appearing on the second day. Not knocking. Not calling out. Just appearing at the gate. Standing there for a moment. Looking at the mill with expressions she couldn't quite read from a distance. Curiosity mostly. Some concern. Tom came first. Of course Tom came first. He didn't say I told you so. She had expected him to. He just stood at the gate with a wrapped loaf of bread in his hands and an expression that was trying very hard to be disapproving and not quite managing it. He left the bread on the gate post without a word. Gloria watched him from the doorway. "Thank you, Tom," she called. He waved without turning around. Kept walking. She ate the bread slowly that evening, sitting on an old wooden crate near the hearth. The fire, small, careful, nursed from a handful of dry material she'd found in the corner, gave off just enough warmth to make the immediate space bearable. A young woman named Priya came on the third day. Left a folded blanket on the gate post without knocking. An older man, gray-haired, quiet, someone Gloria recognized from the village but had never properly spoken to, left a bundle of dry firewood on the fourth day and was gone before she reached the door. The village was watching. But it was also, quietly, anonymously, helping. At night, When the fire died down and the cold crept back in, Gloria would sit with her torch and look at the wall. She hadn't touched the carvings yet. Hadn't tried to fully understand them. She told herself she was too tired. Too focused on survival. Too busy making the place livable to spend time on old mysteries. But that wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler and stranger. She was afraid. Not of the carvings themselves. Not of what they looked like. Afraid of what they might mean. Because every time she looked at them, every time the torchlight caught those careful, deliberate lines, something moved in her chest. Something old and quiet and deeply personal. Like a door inside her was slowly opening. And she wasn't sure yet what was on the other side. What was someone trying to say? Who had stood in this exact spot, torch or candle in hand, and carved these words into stone? And why did it feel, more and more with every passing night, like they had carved them specifically for her? It was the 6th night. And Gloria couldn't sleep again. This had been happening since the 2nd day, this strange, restless wakefulness that came exactly around 2 a.m. and refused to leave. She would lie still for a while, eyes open, staring at the stone ceiling above her, listening to the wind move around the outside of the building. And then, always, her eyes would drift toward the wall. That corner. That specific corner. Pulling at her like a tide. She gave up fighting it. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, picked up her torch, and walked to the far wall. Sat down on the cold stone floor directly in front of the carvings. And this time, she didn't rush. Didn't scan quickly and pull back. Didn't tell herself she was too tired or too cold or not ready. This time she looked. Really looked. The way you read something that matters. Slowly. Carefully. Line by line. Shape by shape. The torchlight was steady in her hand. She started at the top left corner, where the carvings were deepest, most deliberate, and worked her way across. Numbers first. Dates. Carved with precision, each digit clean and intentional. 1941. 1942. 1943. War years. Her throat tightened slightly, but she kept going. Then names. 6 of them. Arranged in a careful column, each one separated by a thin horizontal line. Women's names. All of them. She read each one quietly to herself. Some were common names for that era. Some she didn't recognize. And then, 5th from the top, a name that made her hand go very still on the torch. She read it again. Then again. No. Her heart was doing something she couldn't describe. Not racing. Not stopping. Something between the two. A kind of suspended, held moment where the whole world goes very quiet. Below each name, carved small, careful, unmistakable. A cross. 6 names. 6 crosses. Gloria sat with that for a long moment. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Just let the understanding settle into her slowly, the way cold settles into a room. These women hadn't just worked here. Something had happened to them here. Or because of here. She pulled the torchlight lower, toward the bottom section of the wall, the part she had always looked at quickly and moved past. There was a drawing there. Simple lines. No artistic skill, just honest, functional marks. A building. This building. The mill, unmistakable, the shape of the roof, the position of the door, even the outline of the stone basin on the north side. And in front of it, a figure. A woman. Standing straight. Facing forward. Head up. Below the drawing, 2 lines of text, carved smaller than everything else. More hurried maybe. Like someone writing quickly. Like someone who wasn't sure how much time they had left. Gloria leaned closer. Moved the torch until the light hit the letters at exactly the right angle. Read them slowly. We were here. We did what was needed. If you find this, please remember us. Tell someone. Tell anyone. The breath left Gloria's body completely. She sat back. Stared at the wall. 55 years. This had been sitting here for 55 years. In the dark. In the silence. In a building nobody entered and nobody asked about. Waiting. These women had carved their names into stone because they knew that no one was going to do it for them. No medal. No ceremony. No record. They had done something that mattered, and they understood perfectly well that the world was not going to notice. So they made sure at least the stone would remember. Gloria's hands were shaking now. Not from cold. She turned the torch toward the base of the old grain shelf. She had glanced there before, just the usual debris of a long-abandoned building. Dust. Broken bits of old wood. A scattering of unidentifiable material. But now she looked properly. She moved closer. Crouched down, slowly, carefully, one hand on the wall for balance. And there, pushed back against the very base of the wall, almost completely buried under decades of accumulated dust and small debris, was a tin box. Small. Rectangular. Once painted dark green, now almost entirely rust-brown. It had a small latch. Locked once, probably. But age had done what keys couldn't. The latch gave way with almost no resistance. The lid lifted. Inside, letters. A bundle of them. Folded carefully, tied with a piece of string so old it disintegrated slightly when she touched it. The paper was yellowed to the color of old bone. Some edges had crumbled. Some folds had become tears. But they were there. Preserved by the tin. By the cold dry air. By something that felt, in this moment, less like luck and more like intention. Gloria lifted the first letter carefully. Unfolded it with both hands. Held the torch close. The handwriting was small and neat. Slightly slanted. The kind of handwriting people learned in school in the 1930s. Careful, practiced, permanent. She read the first line. Then the second. Then the third. And stopped. Her eyes went back to the top of the letter. To the date, March 1943. To the greeting. To the careful neat signature at the very bottom of the page. She read the name there slowly. Once. Twice. The torch trembled in her hand. Because the name signed at the bottom of that letter, written in ink that had survived 80 years of darkness and silence and forgetting, was her mother's name. Her mother's name. Gloria's legs stopped working. She sat down on the cold stone floor, not carefully, not deliberately, just down. Suddenly. Completely. The letter still in her hands. The torch still on. And outside, the wind moved quietly around the old stone walls. As if it had been waiting, patiently, faithfully, for exactly this moment. For someone to finally know. She read through the entire night. Every single letter. She didn't stop for water. Didn't stop for warmth. Didn't notice when the fire died down completely and the cold crept back into the room like a slow, quiet tide. She just read. The torch stayed steady in her hand. Page after page. Letter after letter. Each one unfolded with the same careful slowness, both hands, like handling something sacred. Because that's what it was. Sacred. There were 11 letters in total. Some short, just a few lines, written quickly, words pressed close together like there wasn't enough paper or enough time. Some longer, careful, detailed, written in that neat slanted hand Gloria was already starting to recognize. Starting to know. Her mother's hand. Eleanor. That was her name. Eleanor Margaret Hartley. A name Gloria had spoken 10,000 times in her life. Had written on forms and cards and envelopes. Had said quietly in prayers and loudly in arguments and softly in grief. But reading it here, in this ink on this paper, in this place, felt entirely different. Like meeting someone for the first time. Like realizing you never actually knew them at all. The letters told a story. Not a dramatic story. Not the kind with grand speeches and heroic moments. A quiet story. A working story. The kind made of early mornings and careful decisions and fear that had to be swallowed down and kept moving regardless. Eleanor had come to this mill in the spring of 1941. 22 years old. Recently married, Gloria's father was already stationed somewhere in France, letters coming back slow and irregular. She had been approached by a woman named Ruth, the first name on that carved wall, who had explained simply and without decoration what they were doing here. Documents. Messages. Names. People who needed to disappear from certain lists before the wrong people found them. Jewish families mostly. Some political. Some just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Ruth had contacts. The mill had isolation. And Eleanor, quiet, careful, steady Eleanor, had the kind of face and manner that made people trust her without knowing why. She had said yes. Without hesitating. Gloria read that part 3 times. Without hesitating. She thought about her mother. The woman she had known. Quiet. Practical. Never dramatic. Never one for big statements or emotional displays. The kind of woman who fixed things without making a fuss. Who kept going when going was hard. Who never, not once, mentioned any of this. Not a word. Not a single word in all the years they had shared. Why? The answer came 3 letters later. In a letter dated November 1943, the handwriting slightly less steady than the others, the words more carefully chosen, Eleanor wrote about what had happened to Ruth. Gloria read it slowly. Ruth had been identified. Someone had talked, not maliciously, just carelessly, a name mentioned in the wrong company at the wrong moment. Ruth had been taken in for questioning. She had come back 3 days later. Didn't speak about it. Didn't need to. The way she moved told the story well enough. After that, Eleanor wrote, they had all understood something clearly. This had to stay silent. Not just now. Forever. Because the people they had helped were still out there. Still living under names that weren't their own. And one loose word, even years later, even after the war, could still find them. So they had made a promise. All 6 of them. Standing in this exact room. Silence. Permanent silence. And then they had carved their names into the wall. Because promises between living people can be kept. But stone keeps its own promises. Stone doesn't forget. Stone doesn't get tired or careless or old. Stone just waits. Gloria lowered the letter slowly. Looked at the wall. At the 6 names carved there in the dark. At her mother's name, 5th from the top, looking back at her across 80 years of silence. She understood now why nobody had entered this building since 1969. She understood the look on the old woman's face when she had walked away from the village with her bag over her shoulder. She understood the strange pull she had felt toward this place her entire life. That quiet, persistent, inexplicable pull she had never been able to name. Her mother had been here. Her mother had left something here. Not by accident. Not carelessly. For her. The gray morning light was coming through the stone gaps by the time Gloria finished the last letter. Thin and pale and gentle. The kind of early light that makes everything look washed and new. She sat on the cold floor with the letters in her lap and the tin box beside her and the wall of names in front of her. And she cried. Not from sadness. Not exactly. From the particular overwhelm of understanding something completely for the very first time. Of having a piece of yourself, a missing piece you didn't even know was missing, suddenly, quietly returned. Her mother had not been just a quiet woman who kept the house and made the tea and held everything together without complaint. She had been brave. Profoundly, quietly, permanently brave. And she had never said a word. Gloria wiped her face with the back of her hand. Looked at the letters. At the wall. At the pale morning coming through the stone. And she made a decision. Not rushed. Not emotional. Calm and clear and absolute. People were going to know about this. Not just Tom. Not just the village. Everyone. These women had kept their promise. For 80 years they had stayed silent, stayed hidden, stayed carved into a stone wall in an abandoned building at the edge of a village nobody much thought about. But the promise had a condition. If you find this, please remember us. Tell someone. Tell anyone." Gloria looked at her mother's name one last time. "I found it, Mum," she whispered. "I'm going to tell everyone." The phone rang on a Tuesday morning. Gloria almost didn't answer. She was sitting outside on the old stone step, weak autumn sun on her face, chipped mug of tea in both hands, and for a moment she just looked at the screen. At that one word, David, her son, 53 years old, successful, busy, the kind of busy that slowly, quietly becomes an excuse for everything. She answered on the third ring. "Mum." Something was different immediately. Not the usual David. Not the clipped, efficient voice with a meeting waiting somewhere behind it. This was slower. Heavier. The voice of someone who had been sitting with something uncomfortable for a while and had finally decided to stop sitting. "I saw the article," he said. "Small mention. Local paper online. Elderly woman. Old mill. Wartime discovery." He paused. "Mum, is that you?" "Yes," Gloria said simply. "That's me." Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't know this would happen. When the house situation, when everything happened, I wasn't thinking clearly. The finances were complicated and I told myself it was the only option and I just..." He stopped. Started again. "I should have tried harder. I should have called more. I should have been there. And I wasn't. And I'm sorry." Gloria looked out across the overgrown mill yard. At the ivy on the walls. At the pale sky above. She had imagined this conversation many times over the past weeks. Had rehearsed things she might say. Sharp things. True things. The kind of words that had been sitting quietly in her chest for years, waiting for the right moment. But sitting here now, tea in her hands, letters inside on the shelf, her mother's name carved into the wall behind her. The sharp words didn't come. Only tired, honest ones. "I know, David," she said. "I know it was complicated. Come stay with us, Mum. Properly. Emma and I have talked about it. The kids miss you. We have the room. You shouldn't be living in an abandoned mill," Gloria said. A beat. I was going to say, difficult conditions. Despite everything, the corner of Gloria's mouth moved. "I'm fine, David. I mean that. Mum. But before I answer anything," she said, "I need to ask you something first." He went quiet. Waiting. "Do you know what your grandmother did during the war?" Silence. "Gran." His voice shifted, confused now, caught off guard. "She worked somewhere, didn't she? A factory or... I honestly don't know much about it. She never talked about it." "No," Gloria said softly. "She never did." And then she told him. Everything. The mill. The door that didn't want to open. The cold air and the darkness and the carved names on the wall. The 6 women. Ruth. The documents and the messages and the families who needed to disappear before the wrong people found them. The tin box. The letters. Her mother, Eleanor, 22 years old, newly married, husband somewhere in France. Asked to do something dangerous and quiet and completely unrecognized. Saying yes. Without hesitating. Keeping that promise for the rest of her entire life. Never saying a word. Not to her husband. Not to her children. Not to Gloria, who had sat beside her in her final days and held her hand and never once knew. Gloria spoke for almost 25 minutes without stopping. David didn't interrupt once. Not once. When she finished, silence. She counted the seconds without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then. Mum. Just that. Just her name. But the way he said it. 53 years of distance compressed into 2 syllables. All the missed calls and shortened visits and conversations that stayed surface level because going deeper felt like too much work. All of it, in just her name. "I'm sorry," he said. Voice low. Unsteady. "For Gran. For not knowing. For not asking. For everything. Gloria closed her eyes. The autumn sun was still on her face. Gentle. Patient. "I know, love," she said quietly. "I know. Some apologies don't need a response. Some silences, after everything, finally feel like rest." She didn't leave the mill. Not immediately. David had offered. Genuinely, warmly, without condition. And Gloria had heard the sincerity in every word. But she told him the same thing she had told Tom weeks earlier, quietly, clearly, without anger. "Not yet. There's something I need to finish first." The historian arrived on a Wednesday. A young woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes, small notebook already open before she reached the door. She stepped inside the mill and stopped immediately. Looked at the wall. Didn't speak for a full minute. Then turned to Gloria and said, "How has nobody found this before?" Gloria thought about that question for a moment. "Because nobody looked," she said simply. The next 2 weeks moved differently than any 2 weeks Gloria could remember. People came every day now. The historian. Then an archivist from the county records office. Then a journalist from a regional paper who sat with Gloria for 3 hours and asked careful, respectful questions and actually listened to the answers. Then someone from a national wartime heritage organization who drove 4 hours without being asked and stood in front of that carved wall with tears running quietly down his face. Gloria watched all of it. She sat in on every meeting, answered every question, handed over the letters carefully, each one now preserved in a clear archive sleeve, and watched them be documented with the seriousness they had always deserved. She felt something shifting inside her with every passing day. Not just pride. Something deeper than pride. Completion. Like a sentence that had been left unfinished for 80 years was finally, carefully, properly, being given its full stop. The local council meeting was held on a Friday evening. Gloria sat at the table, not at the side, not in the back, at the table. Because Tom had insisted and she hadn't argued. They discussed restoration. A small heritage marker. Possibly a permanent display of the letters inside the restored mill. A formal submission to the National Wartime Records so that Ruth and Eleanor and all 6 women would exist, officially, permanently, in the record of what happened and who helped and who paid the price quietly and without recognition. Gloria sat straight in her chair through all of it. At 81, evicted, dismissed, told in 100 small ways that her chapter was finished. She was writing a new one. The journalist's final question, published in the article that ran 3 weeks later, was simple. "How do you feel, Gloria, after everything?" She had thought about it before answering. Really thought. Not reaching for something quotable. Just honest. "I came here with nothing," she said. "And I found everything. My mother was brave in silence for 80 years. The least I can do is be brave out loud for whatever years I have left." Some things don't end. They wait. For the right person. At exactly the right moment. Gloria had been that person. And she had been ready.